And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shared his reaction to Biden bowing out on social media yesterday. He says he's known President Biden for years. Trudeau calls Biden a great man, saying everything he does is guided by his love for his country. He continues to say that as president, Biden is a partner to Canadians and a true friend. Trudeau ends his message by saying thank you to President Biden and the First Lady. And I want to bring in Catherine Tunney now. She's following all the developments on this for us from Ottawa this morning. So, Catherine, what could a potential Harris presidency mean for Canada?
Well, there's probably a bit of a sigh of relief coming from the Trudeau side. And, as you can see from that tweet, that he sent about Biden, there's a bit of warmth there. We saw from Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, she, in her statement, really underlined Canada's alignment with the U.S. and the Biden administration on things like trade and climate, and, of course, both sides' opposition to the war in Ukraine. And that alignment can't be underscored when we're talking about a new administration coming over. So I think there's probably a lot of relief that the fact that Canada already has a relationship with Kamala Harris and her team. Trudeau and her actually just sat down one-on-one back in the spring, and where they talked about, again, shared priorities, things like gender equality, a predictable trade relationship, things like that. So a fair bit of groundwork has already been done. And former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman, says that could just make for a very smooth transition if ultimately she wins the nomination and if ultimately she goes on to win in November. Take a listen.
Kamala, Madam Vice President, has a bit of history with Canada, having grown up and spent some time in Montreal. And so I know she has a fondness for the country, and I think that would be a real good pick if the Democrats go down this road and if she's eventually made president of the United States.
So as the former ambassador mentioned, she does have ties to Canada. She lived in Montreal for 5 years, still has family here as well. So you'd imagine that it would be smart for Canadian officials in any, conversations with either her or her team behind the scenes to raise that fondness and to bring it up. Of course, as Team Canada makes sure that Canada's interests are on the next president's radar, no matter who that is.
Catherine, regardless of who wins the upcoming election, how is Canada preparing for the next presidency in the U.S.?
Well, they're already engaged in, what's been kind of called a charm offensive, if you will, sending officials down to talk to Congress, senators, governors about Canada's trade relationship. And that's because, not just about, if a Democrat is reelected, but also what a second Trump presidency could mean for this country. Of course, he's already threatening to impose tariffs on Canada. The new NAFTA trade agreement comes up for review in 2026. And of course, Canada and its officials are, I'm sure, apprehensive about what could happen there. So they've been sending people down as part of this charm offensive. Earlier, Chris Hall, he's a managing principal, I should say, at Navigator, kind of underscored what that charm offensive looks like.
I think right now the big key that the Team Canada approach that the Canadian government has been taking will continue. They'll reach out to members of Congress in key trading states. They'll meet with state governors. They will try to impress, once again, the importance of that bilateral relationship, not just for trade, but for defense. And, seriously, I think the Canadian government has to spend a little more time addressing one of the key irritants, or maybe two key irritants. One is spending more on defense, particularly focusing on defense of the northern part of this continent. And the other is that digital services tax, which even the Democrats are really unhappy about.
So clearly, Canada has a lot of work to do. And as much as we talk about the uncertainty south of the border with whoever wins in November, Canada is also looking at election, right? Probably in the next year or so. So, of course, we'll be watching, yes, how the Trudeau side, positions itself and who it's talking to, but we'll also be watching to see how Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative team prepares for whoever wins come November, be it a Democrat or a Republican.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. That's Catherine Tunney reporting for us from Ottawa.